And welcome to the Northland Sports Page. Happy Saturday, kind of an overcast Saturday. Yet another Saturday in the COVID-19 era. Are we any closer to an end? That is the question. Brian Prudhomme, Dave Cook, Topher Davis. I don't even know, as I go back on my own statement I made 2 seconds ago, I don't even know if that can be a question because I don't know that we know how this will end or when can it end. But are we closer to positive news? Your guys' take on the week that was.
There's a heck of a lot more chatter about it, Brian. Are we closer? Yeah, I probably think so because where there's smoke, there's fire, and the smoke is certainly getting denser. The question is going to be who's going to take the risk and go first. Hockey sounds like it has a plan, but they're not really doing much with it. Basketball sounds like they're starting to open anyway, but baseball should be the one to go first, right?
Yeah, it is interesting. I think baseball, you think logically they should be ready to go and get things going faster than some of the other leagues. But I mean, every league's got more hoops to jump through and trying to figure out the proper procedural to do it in a safe way and the testing purposes, because they have to test everybody. And I think some of the public relations, just the view of having testing that available for professional athletes when it's not maybe necessarily generally available for the general public.
Well, and I think the fact is sports is what we like to focus on. Sports is what we'll talk about for roughly the next 2 hours. But I think we know that sports is down the proverbial priority list a little bit. We're struggling getting normal life open first. Restaurant owners got good news a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, got tougher news back on Wednesday. What do you think of that? I'm pitying restaurant owners in a pretty big way.
Yeah, I can't. I mean, there was a thing on the Hansons on Facebook, the Duluth Grill, and they own Corktown and they own the OMC, and how long they've been in business and how difficult this last little bit has been, and they might be they are as strong as any ownership group in the area, and for them to be struggling as well, it's tough to see friends of yours in the industry struggle.
Absolutely. I think the restaurant industry, the hospitality industry in general, is just getting hammered by this thing. And it's a very difficult position to be in because by definition, hospitality requires a lot of people, right? And that's the biggest problem with the pandemic is you can't get a lot of people together. So it's trying to figure out the best way. And I think, the opening outside is difficult, especially in Duluth where the weather can change so quickly this time of year. It'd be different if it was July or August, I think, but we'll see. Hopefully, more can make it through than possible. Maybe there'll be some accommodations that are made, but it's going to be a difficult road for sure for everybody. So hopefully when everyone gets out, they can get out and support those restaurants. And I know there's a strong Northland initiative as well that recently got started by the Duluth, Hermantown, Greater Downtown Council to support the restaurant industry. So check out strongnorthland.com as well.
Absolutely. Dave, you actually were right before you edited your own sentence on your take there. You said it's tough to see friends in your industry, and you paused and said struggle. But you're right, though. It's tough to see friends in an industry right now. This is still tough to be out and be social. You guys are really the only people that I see not named my wife. So I have to ask the same question I have week to week. How are you getting by?
It's been kind of an interesting week this week, Brian, with all the changes in local business and industry. With AAR checking out and the things that are going on at Essentia around the office, around the workforce center, we are starting to make plans for people who are looking for work. It went from a global pandemic to finally something that's really kicking our area in the teeth. Right? It's kind of was brought home over the last week of not the fact that we can't be together, but what kind of ramifications this is going to have long term.
No, you're right. Topher, I'm glad he said teeth because that's the nicest way you can say that this area is getting kicked. Go ahead.
No, yeah, you're right, and it's a tough situation to see. Big companies like AAR shut down operations completely and leave town, or such mainstays like Essentia have such a large cut to the workforce. It's difficult to see because those are our friends and our neighbors that are affected by those sorts of things. That it's really tough when that hits home, but it's hitting Duluth locally very hard, but it's hitting hard everywhere as well, and it's going to be tough for everyone across the whole country to dig out of this thing.
Absolutely. So we are the Northland Sports Page, so we will get to some sports. That's the idea. And a lot of sports and a lot of sporting organizations have said, pick a quarantine house. Who would you like to be quarantined with? And they've listed people, and it's a tough selection. I know I angered some people at the College of St. Scholastica because, in my opinion, you couldn't pick a wrong one. But apparently, I didn't pick the right one because if you knew somebody in one you didn't pick, you heard about it. Our quarantine house is kind of the three of us every Saturday, but it gave us a fun topic. The very first week we did this, we talked about, well, what individual athlete would you like to be quarantined with? We threw out some different answers. But what about if you were quarantined with entire teams? And I mean ever. You don't have to do this year's rosters. They're experiencing it. We get it. But what if this happened whenever you wanted it to, per se? You wouldn't want it, but you get the idea. We can go sport by sport. I think we can do national spectrum. I think we could localize to Minnesota as well. If your answer is the same, obviously that makes it easier. Where do you want to start? Because just thinking about this was kind of fun because it wasn't about how good were they, how bad were they. It was what personalities are in there. Now, those personalities might play into how good were they, how bad were they, but where would you find it most interesting because you're stuck with these people? You might as well enjoy yourself. Topher, what sport do you want to start with?
Well, I think for me, the easiest one was baseball, but I think that's just because there's so many characters in baseball and they get a chance to show their personality so much over the long season. I mean, you talked about teams being, not necessarily the best teams, but maybe the best to hang out with. And for me, I think it'd be wild, but it'd be interesting to get quarantined with the 86 Mets. Because team would have
so right off the bat, this already isn't fun because I was trying to go Topher's wheelhouse because I know he's a Mets guy, and I'm going to go, man, the 86 Mets would have been a blast. You got Doc, you got Daryl, you got Keith Hernandez, you got Lenny Dykstra before he was a mess. You got Gary Carter.
Personalities galore.
Mitchell.
Right.
Hojo.
You got Ray Knight. You've got whoever you wanted. You got Ron Darling, who I can't stand as a broadcaster. Maybe I could tell him that. But at the same time, holy cow, that's a great place to start. Dave, you said this will be fun because we can pick some teams and we can debate. Well, the debate part's off to a rough start because we're going, yep, exactly, absolutely. But that's a great place
that to start. It'd be something.
I think we're going to run into that period. I think we're going to run into, oh my gosh, yeah, that'd be a good group.
Well, that's the good news. We've only got 15 minutes till our first guest arrives, so we might have to do this sporadically throughout the show. But 86 Mets is a great place to start. Dave, you talked about one that would be more meaningful to you. You even picked a location to party with him. Expand on that.
Well, I think one of my favorite stories is Whitey Herzog saying that he wouldn't fly his Cardinals in the night before a game against Montreal. They had to bring him in the day of the game, so at least he'd get one good game out of him because they were going to be drunk and high the rest of the week. So I think that that early 80s Cardinals team and their scene in Montreal would be something to behold. I'm not sure I'd partake, but it would be something to see.
So Dave's going to be the wallflower in the cool kids group. I don't know if I like that idea.
Everybody who knows me knows that's my spot, right?
See, now he said that. Dave has mentioned his intoxicated behavior, and as much as I don't want to expand on that, I can honestly say that I've never seen it. This almost makes me want to. Topher, I'm going to go to another spot for you and I because Mike Cuellar basically told me that I would like this group. I'm going to the 70 Orioles because he told me such great stories about them. First of all, I want to bring them back. I don't know if you can, reestablish people living on this earth that are no longer, but I would want him there with me. But that whole group, I mean, I'm a Twins fan for my life. We'll talk about them in a minute. But because I'm a Twins fan, I've not really known great pitching in plural form. The Orioles had everything it took. I would love to ask those guys, what's your secret? Because you guys are the group.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That Orioles team was amazing and a fun group to be with. I mean, that starting rotation, just wins galore. I mean, it's incredible to think about. And so, Cuellar and Jim Palmer, and it's interesting because I'm talking about Mike Cuellar did not like Jim Palmer.
I know, but show off your baseball acumen. Name the other two. Because Dave, I was going to say, would it be fair to go up to Pat Dobson and go, do you know you're the other guy? Because I feel like everybody knows Palmer. A lot of people know McNally. Duluthians know Cuellar. And so 3 out of 4, it's not Meatloaf. It's a little bit better. But I want to go to Pat Dobson and say, do you know you're the other guy?
Storm Davis? No, it was Pat Dobson. Hey, we also forgot another twin, a twin that would be fun. And we had to follow him all over baseball over the years. But wouldn't it be fun to be quarantined with Billy Martin? Pick a team. I mean, the A's team hated each other. The Yankees hated each other. What did Thurman Munson say? They all came to the ballpark in separate cabs. I mean, it would just be amazing to see that over and over again, huh?
Oh, no question. If you do this individually, Billy Martin's a great place to start. What about, and I don't want to expand on this because I want to stick to the team concept, but what about somebody like Gaylord Perry? I always laughed at Gaylord Perry because he'd play in old timers games, and across his uniform, he'd have to have the logo of the teams that he played for. He looked like a NASCAR driver because he had half the teams in the league listed. So I guess it'd be fun to be quarantined with somebody like that because you don't feel as quarantined because you're always on the move.
Yeah, that's the thing. I wasn't saying Billy in particular, but pick one of his teams. His teams always seem to have something going on.
No doubt about that. So let's go local. Let's go to the Twins because I feel like 87-91 is low hanging fruit because they won. 87 for me would be cool because I'm 8 years old in that mix. But I'm probably going to go 2009 for the grind all the way up through 163 just to see what they were like because they were dead in September and then all of a sudden came into the mix. Or I would go 2006 because you had a batting champion, you had an MVP, you had the Cy Young. Did they know how good they were? That kind of thing.
Yeah, the 2006 team's a great question because I don't know if they knew how good they were. I'm gonna go to the team that built the dynasty. I want to see that 82, 83, 84 Twins teams that were brutal, but all the names
Yeah.
that we revere now, right? That's when they started. Herbeck and Gaetti and Gagne. They were terrible, but
So
they
here's the
got
question. Do you start in 84 so you don't have to lose 100 games? Or do you just start in 82 to watch the development from the start?
Yep, I think you go right to 82 and see the pains, but know how it was going to finish, right? And watch their maturity and watch how they grew as a ball player.
Well, and maybe here's the question, and I should know the answer because I came up with the topic, but here's the question. So if you're going back to 1982 to be quarantined with those Twins, are you quarantined in 1982 with them so you're dealing with personalities losing 100 games? Or are you sitting with them now talking about that group? Because then you could be quarantined with 82 and be quarantined with 87 and had a lot of the same guys and talk about the transition.
Yeah, you really would. Remember how I'd love to be. It would be really interesting to hear John Castino's take on it because he was supposed to be the guy. He was the rookie of the year, and then he got hurt so bad that by the time they were good, he was gone.
Yeah, that is interesting. And I had a similar take, Dave, as the beginning of a dynasty. Not quite didn't work out quite as well for the Twins, but I was going to think the '02 Twins. Just that'd be a fun group to kind of get around with. They go bust up the Moneyball A's, and just a team that really starts to find themselves, similar to what you were talking about in the early '80s, where it's a group of players that came together, that get to know them Twins, and then suddenly they start winning and getting things together. So that's where kind of my thought. Obviously, the 87-91 are low hanging fruit, but yeah, that '02 is what I was thinking.
Well, and 2002 is a pretty good take because we're a little bit older in terms of our baseball following history. If you're obviously 18 or under, 2002 is where you have to go to have a team that you were around to, witness a playoff series victory. So if you weren't big into 87 and 91, I'm wondering if the '02 team is your gold standard because at least they went somewhere.
Yeah, I think that might be, unfortunately, because the Twins' lack of playoff success since that time, I guess, is maybe that '02 team. But yeah, it was a fun little run for that '02 team as well, and they had some fun personalities as well with Dougie Baseball and that that whole crew just messing, screwing around, having a good time.
Well, and AJ Przinsky telling everybody they shocked the world. Dave, before we close baseball with the Twins, I have to ask you this because you and I love this team and we bring them up the most. Do we hang out with the 92 Twins and do we ask about, I think it's the Eric Fox home run? Do we ask them that question and just see if everything tailspins on us and we want to get out right away?
That's kind of how they played, right? As soon as the Fox home run was 3/4 of the way to the seats, everything tailspin, and they wanted to get out of there. So why not? That team, that's probably the most disappointing team of my lifetime because that team's still the best team I've seen the Twins have, and just couldn't get it done.
All right, so what sport is next? We've got basketball, hockey, and football to choose from, and we got to squeeze them in 10 minutes before Baseball legend locally, Ben Jukich, will join us. We don't have to squeeze it in per se. We can do it again as we go. But in the 10 minutes, where would you guys like to start?
Well, let's talk about the football team first. Let's talk Vikings, because I think we can mix in hoops with Dave Hoops later. But the Vikings,
Andy's a hockey dad. That's well done.
I think the Vikings team, the Love Boat team, would be really interesting to know what happened with that team, and just listen to their stories and whatnot.
Topher, have you noticed something? I think socially that Dave is probably the most low key of the three of us. But in this topic so far, he's talked about guys getting drunk or high for baseball and he wants to join them. And now he's hanging out with the Love Boat guys. This is get to know Dave Cook in a way you never have before. Happy Saturday on the Northland
That
Sports
would be
Page.
but that's the interesting stuff. The things we know about, those things we already know about. Let's find about things that the secrets that were put behind the walls. Let's listen to that.
What about nationally? And I know the Vikings are part of a national picture, but the 86 Mets jumped out for all of us right away. Is there a football team nationally that you're going, I would have enjoyed that team? Because I could say, well, I would have liked to talk to the Patriots that were undefeated and then lost. And I will say that, and I will mean it, because it had to be such perfect sailing for a while. But I also thought, well, if I say the Patriots, I'm going to get the massive eye roll from both of you. But is there somebody that sticks out for you on a national level?
For me, on a national level, I guess the equivalent of the 86 Mets would be the 85 Bears. I think the Super Bowl shuffle, that whole crew, Jim McMahon, Walter Payton, Refrigerator Perry doing the dance and all that fun stuff. I think that's those 85 Bears, they knew how to have a good time too. And they took care of business. And plus Mike Ditka. You can't forget about the coach.
See, I thought about that group, and then the Viking fan in me said, are you really going to hang out with a division rival? Because I like the Bears' personalities, and I like them more now, 35 years later exactly, than I did at age 6 when they were beating my team. But that's a good take, too. Dave, what do you got? What about some of those Redskins teams with the Hogs or, Jim Brown's groups or something like that?
No, I'm thinking the guy that we all love and kind of the grandfather of football for all of the guys that are, Topher's age anyway. I'd like to go see John Madden's Raiders teams and listen to the man pontificate about, if you want to win the game, you got to hold on to the rock, and just to really see if he uses the same kind of cliches with John Matuzak that he used with Pat Summerall.
That's pretty good, because that's again the question of, are you hanging out in that year or are you hanging out with that person now? Because I would like to see if John Madden was a lot more profound back then than how I know him as, here's a team that if they score more points than the other team, they got a great chance to win. I don't want to sit and have that conversation, but I do want to eat up John Madden's football knowledge. So Topher, Dave gave his Vikings team right away. Do you have one that stuck out for you?
I mean, I know it's kind of, I feel like it's low-hanging fruit, but the 98 Vikings, when you get Randy Moss in there and just the way everything switched around and Randall Cunningham taking the reins and that crew, it just would be interesting to kind of maybe get a little more of an inside look at that team, because there's so much talked about that team, but I'm sure there's more going on behind the scenes and what it was like, to have that rookie come in and do things, and Chris Carter's real take on Randy Moss, taking away his spotlight, things like that.
No, I think that's a great take. And I went with the other NFC Championship loser that's been fairly recent. I feel like after 98, the next best known team is 09. And quite frankly, it's because you put Brett Favre and Jared Allen in the same room. I don't know what else you need. Now, one question I would have, you'd also have AP in that group. You'd have to be a little cautious, right? But you'd have to be a little cautious with AP, because if you said the wrong thing, he could flip a switch at a moment's notice. However, here's my question. Do the coaches come with this group? Because one of the first things that I'd want to ask Brett Favre, Jared Allen, Percy Harvin, etc., is Chili really that big of an idiot? But if he's with me, can I do that?
Yeah, that should change everybody's vote. Then we should all choose the 87 team with Jerry Burns in charge if we're going to include the coach.
Right, and then just ask him about Bob Schnelker. Or, obviously any of the Purple People Eater teams for me would be just eat up the legacy, eat up the history, because I know nothing except for what I've heard, what I've been told, what I've seen in old film. I wasn't there.
Yeah, that team would be interesting, but I think that team was very stoic. You know, so I'm not sure how far you'd get into stories, right?
But see, is
But
that perfect for me then? Is it because you're hanging out with drinkers and drug users and love boat guys, and that's opposite of you? If I'm hanging out with a big passive shy group, is that new wheelhouse for me too?
wait a minute. Does that mean that? What does that say about the two of us, Brian?
I
If
don't
all
think
of a
we want to
sudden I'm hanging
open.
out with the opposites, you say you're hanging out with the opposites, and you kind of just defined me.
Right. I don't know that I want to open that Pandora's box. If you have things to say about Dave or I as personalities, put them in the comments below. Make sure you hit like or subscribe. All right. So we left ourselves 4 minutes. Do you want to expand on either of the two sports we've covered, or do you want to switch to another sport? Because I have thought of a couple more baseball teams as we went.
Yeah.
I kind of wanted to hang with the 2010 Twins. They were very good, but they were also the first group to play their home games outdoors in ages. What was it like coming to Target Field every single day going, whoa? I
How about
mean,
the first day?
right. I was there that day. Yeah, that had to be just crazy.
I always think about the 34 Cardinals, the Gas House Gang. You know, between the Murderers Row Yankees, the next team with a nickname is the 34 Cardinals, the Gas House Gang, with Dizzy and Daffy Dean and Muscles Joe Medwick and Pepper Martin. I mean, all these famous nicknames. All those guys were on that team, and they weren't called the Gas House Gang because they were neat, clean, and quiet.
Right. Let me go to the National League spokesman again. Topher, I was going to go 90 Reds. Sabo, O'Neill, Barry Larkin, Eric Davis. But I want to know how crazy, how nasty.
Nasty
Who are the
Boys.
Nasty Boys? Exactly.
The Nasty Boys, exactly. That would be an interesting crew to hang out with for sure. I mean, anytime you get all those different personalities locked in the same room together, same house, it's gonna be a wild time. And you talk about those 90 Reds were something crazy. And I'm gonna throw a bone out here for Brian's mom, the 27 Yankees.
Well, you have to. You have to. I feel like we lose credibility as baseball historians if we don't bring them up.
Right.
And the only reason I didn't is because I don't know that I want to hang with the Yankees. But then I look at the modern era, if you will, Yankees, and I probably would have. Those Yankees of the late 90s, early 2000s who were so good and so many icons. Did I have to cheer for them? No. But do I want to hang out with them and get stories? Yes. Dave, you're nodding.
Yeah,
that doesn't work well for audio.
Oh no, I think you can pick the great Yankee teams throughout history, and I mean, so the 27 team would be amazing. The 39 team that was DiMaggio's first year, the Maris Mantle, the Billy Martin years, like I was saying, the year Thurman Munson died in the middle of the season, and then like Brian, you were saying the more recent generations. I think the Yankees, when they're good, lend themselves to stories and whatnot. So yeah, I think pick a season, and that would be a fun Yankees team to sit with.
What about the groups that bump those good teams off? What about the Diamondbacks? Where you're going? Can you guys believe that you did what you did? What about the Red Sox that pulled the improbable, coming back from 3-0? What did they call themselves? A bunch of idiots. The stories would be great. We've heard some because there's been 30 for 30s, but you get the insight that you wouldn't normally get.
Yeah, I agree with that. Those teams would be fun. That Red Sox team that broke the curse would be fun. The Cubs team that broke their longer curse would be fun.
How about the 97 Marlins, just getting those guys together and being like,
Yes.
hey, remember when you guys played together for that 1 year?
Do you get Jim Leland in the mix and go, how PO'd were you that you didn't have a great team for a whole lot longer? Or do you get Bobby Bonilla at least as part of that and go, so what's it like to cash that check every year? Pick a team he was on. I'd still want to ask that question.
Or that Pirates team right before Bonds decided that steroids were the way to make it. So the last year, that Pittsburgh little dynasty they had.
Yes, so many Pittsburgh teams that didn't get it done. We also talked about breaking curses. Neither of us loved that they won it, I don't think. But what about the Cubs team that finally broke the curse? Would you appreciate those stories?
No, I think that would get old. I think we've heard all those stories. That's not a team that would.
Says the Cardinals fan. I love it.
Yeah, that's the Cardinal fan saying, yeah, no, we don't need to listen to those guys. But Whitey's team would be fun. How about rabbit baseball in the mid 80s where they didn't hit any home runs? The Cardinals.
Well, that's a perfect segue because he's mentioning the Cardinals and he loves them dearly. So we got a guy with us now that's been selected by the Cardinals in the Rule 5 draft in his history. Duluth Denfeld alum Ben Jukich is here. Ben, happy Saturday. Thanks for being here, man.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure.
All right, so we'll let Topher kick it off because we owe Topher this one for connecting us with you. And we've all got
by the way,
questions.
hold on, I gotta interrupt you real quick. Just because
Sure.
you guys brought that up with the Cardinals, I just wanted to show you I still have my shorts from spring training, and I am wearing
way.
today.
Very well done. Very well done.
That
All
was
right,
not
Topher.
on purpose.
Yeah, but that's okay, though. Accidents are sometimes the best intentional things, if you know what I mean. Those are antonyms, but it works. So, Toph, fire away. I'll let you start because thank you for connecting us with Ben. Ben, I don't know if you remember, but you and I met years ago at a curling club. But we've all got questions, so get ready for rapid fire. Topher, go ahead.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, first off, for joining us, Ben. It's been a little while since we hang out a little bit back at Wade Stadium way back in the day. But I just kind of was wondering. I thought it was interesting to get a little bit of your perspective on some of the baseball stuff, and we'll get into I think Korean baseball a little bit later. But first, I mean, you're a local guy graduating from Duluth Denfeld, and then you find your way to McCook Community College. Can you talk a little bit about your path of how you kind of ended up pitching from Denfeld, and then how the baseball stuff started taking off?
That was all just one big accident. I really feel like that to a certain degree. Whoops, my battery's going down on my phone here. But no, it was I when I out of high school, I wasn't throwing that hard. I was 6'4", 170 pounds, just all arms and legs. And it took a few years off, decided to go to college at Brainerd, Central Lakes Community College, where we really kind of partied more than we should have. Baseball was fun, but school was kind of an afterthought, right? And I remember more or less failing out of college because I just didn't go to classes and I didn't get my grades good enough to continue to play. And I went home and played baseball with a couple buddies of mine that had graduated a few years before me at Denfeld. And Jeremy Jorgensen's brother, Gabe Jorgensen, was a player on that team. And Jeremy was the new head coach at McCook Community College down in McCook, Nebraska. And what a lot of people don't know is that I was basically I had enlisted to go into the Army at that point, and I got out of my enlistment with the military because I got a scholarship to go back and play baseball. And you can imagine how upset my recruiter probably was at the time. But
No doubt.
Yeah, so I took advantage of that. And, the rest is kind of history at that point. I had to go down to school and I had to get myself eligible. I was on academic probation for the first season. I had to sit out the first season of baseball. I was not able to play. Really had to prove myself inside the classroom to get my grades up. And the rest is history.
So, Ben, let's talk about the current state of baseball just for a moment. As a former player, what's your take on I hate this phrase, but it fits. It's basically come down to a labor dispute as to if or how or what's the best way to resume post-COVID. Hopefully we can say post-COVID at some point.
Yeah.
Do you side with anybody there? I see both sides. What's your take?
I see both sides. In my opinion, it's a losing battle for the players. They're going to come out looking the ugliest in this whole scenario. And the reason I say it is, yes, you have owners that are billionaires, but if you look at the financial dimension of this entire argument, yes, the owners have all the money, right? The players have a lot of it too. Let's not kid ourselves and joke around. I mean, Josh Donaldson just signed a contract for $94 million. And there's a lot of those guys. There's a lot of those guys that are just making league minimum too. So I'm not just sitting here trying to point out the top level athletes in baseball. However, if you look at revenue incoming from a game, these games are going to be played without fans, which is a lot of the revenue, but not all of it. You have your TV contracts, which probably pay the most, and then you have attendance, ticket sales, and then concessions. You're losing both of those for the rest of the year. More than likely, we're not going to have baseball with fans this year. So for the players to kind of sit back and say, well, we're not going to play if we can't play in front of fans, or, I think their biggest argument right now is the labor dispute. They don't want to give up any more money than they already have. And I get that too. but I don't see a scenario where the players come out of this looking good in a scenario where baseball could potentially return this year.
Yeah, and Ben, and you talk about baseball returning. One place where baseball is happening right now is over in Korea, and then you've got a unique perspective of that because you played in the KBO for a while. You were an all-star over there. Can you talk a little bit about how does a guy from Duluth, Minnesota, end up playing in Korea, and a little bit about how does that happen in the first place? I guess.
Yeah, so we got over to South Korea. I remember I think I was dating my wife. And I had just gotten Rule 5'd by the St. Louis Cardinals and then sent back to Cincinnati. And there was a whole big argument between Cincinnati and St. Louis. St. Louis wanted to keep me. Cincinnati didn't want to give me up. That's a conversation for a whole nother day. So I basically sat in limbo for 3 weeks doing nothing. I wasn't able to work out at the Cardinals facilities because there's too much liability. If I hurt myself, then now they have to keep me on their 25-man roster. Right. And they got to pay me league minimum. So I ended up getting sent back to Cincinnati, where I started the season with a 3-0 record and a 1 ERA through 18 innings, and just came out of the gates firing on all cylinders. And I remember as a young kid by the name of Aroldis Chapman coming up through our system.
Gee, that rings a bell.
Yeah, it rings a bell. And I remember my manager called me into his office, and I'm sitting here going, "This is it. I'm getting the call to the big leagues. This is it." And he pulls me into his office, and he goes, "Hey, this is no reflection on how you've been pitching, but we're moving you to the bullpen because you're not on the 40-man roster, and we have another guy coming up who was Aroldis Chapman, who obviously, I understood and got it, but I was really kind of upset about that at that point." And really kind of felt like I had been put on the back burner, more or less. I know when I got traded to Cincinnati, Wayne Kripke was the general manager, and then Walt Jocketty took over shortly after I had played through my first season, I think, with Cincinnati. And I remember having a conversation with my fiance, or my wife now, and I said, if I ever get a chance to make any bleeping money in this game, I'm taking it. And no kidding, not 2 months later, there was a scout from the LG Twins who was watching me pitch and offered me, wanted me to go over and sign, but we had to obviously wait until the end of the year. And that's really how it worked out. It just kind of happened really organically. I didn't really search for another route out of the organization. I would have loved to stay in the U.S. to play baseball, but from a monetary standpoint, there's no unions in the minor leagues, and the money that they were offering me in South Korea was guaranteed, so it was kind of a no-brainer for us.
Dave, so what we learned from that is Ben Jukich is basically the Wally Pipp of Aroldis Chapman's career. I know you had I know you had a Cincinnati specific question that you were throwing out before Ben joined us. Go ahead.
Yeah, Ben, it's really interesting doing a little bit of research before you got on. When you were in Oakland, you were okay, but when you went to Cincinnati, you're right in the middle of the season, your career went nuts. What did Cincinnati do? What did they teach you? Did you just mature into a pitcher at that point? Because in the minors with Cincinnati, your record is ridiculous.
Well, yeah. So I think a little bit of that played out. If you look at, when I first got traded from Oakland to Cincinnati, my record was horrendous. I think I was 0-3 with like a 16 ERA. And I remember talking to a buddy. I still talk to him every now and again. His name was Thomas Pauly, and great guy. And I remember this is this is a little bit far from the norm, but I remember he said, you're not pitching good. We're going to go party. So we went out and we partied for like 3 nights straight. And I came out of that and I pitched a 1-hit shutout against the Tampa Yankees. And from then on, it was really kind of, I found my groove in a scenario where I felt really uncomfortable not knowing the team that I was around at that point. I'd just gotten traded, so it was kind of different territory for me. But realistically, when I got to AA, I got to work with Chris Bosio, And he was single-handedly, I would credit him with a lot of the success that I had, just discovering who I was as a pitcher and getting the mindset that I needed. Excuse me. And it was really interesting to see the change because it was more mental than anything else for me at that point. It was me being timid and not really confident in myself and my own abilities at that level. And then having a conversation with him about, just going out and being yourself and not necessarily being here to make friends, and not that I'm trying to make enemies or anything like that, but growing thicker skin, especially around fans who are yelling at you all the time, and, teammates that you might not like, whatever it may have been. It was just, what, screw it. I'm just going to go out and I'm going to throw the ball as hard as I can and just do whatever I can to succeed at that point. But yeah, no, I would attribute a lot of my success to, working with Chris. We developed a cut fastball. So my curveball is what got me on the map. My fastball at Dakota Wesleyan is what got me drafted. And then developing a cut fastball when I was in AA really kind of put me over the top. It really became my out pitch in situations where I'd be, bases loaded, runners, one out, trying to get a ground ball, double play, whatever it might have been, keep the ball in the infield. And so, I would attribute a lot of my success to that.
So to think the root of it all, we've had a liquor store owner. We're going to have a brewery guy on next. The root of your success might have had a little something to do with each of those. We'll let that register for what it's worth.
It did. I'm not going to sit here and say we were perfect angels when we were playing in the minor leagues. There's plenty of partying going on, but to a certain extent, I say that tongue in cheek because I was really, once I got to AAA, it was kind of a different ball game. Those are seasoned athletes who either have been to the big leagues or are very close to getting to the big leagues. So it becomes a lot more serious. Preparation is paramount to anything that you do at that level.
So Ben Jukich is with us, former Denfeld Hunter, former Twin, but when I say Twin, I mean LG Twin.
That's right.
So Ben, I don't know how often you're up at 4 a.m. with ESPN or ESPN2 on, but if you are these days, the KBO is what's on the tube quite a bit. What kind of memories come flooding back when you see that?
Some good, some not so good. I remember 2-3 weeks ago, my son woke me up at 5 o'clock because he wanted to watch the game. And immediately I got up and I was like, oh, what am I getting into right now? And it was fun to see some of the players, some of the guys that I played with kind of mature and become higher caliber athletes over there, I would say. It was kind of like I had deja vu when I was watching the game with the LG Twins because they had a lead and then they just completely blew it. That was something that happened quite frequently. It's different over in South Korea. I'm not in the United States. We have so much depth. When it comes to baseball, we've got rookie ball, we've got A ball, we've got extended spring training, we've got AA, AAA, high A. So we've got 6 or 7 different levels beneath the minor leagues. And in South Korea, they only have they have their big league team and then they have their minor league team, and that's it. So the level of competition is good when the team is healthy. But when you start getting people that get hurt, now you're starting to fill in with guys in South Korea that probably would struggle playing at a AA level. So there's a huge gap there, talent-wise, that they're starting to fill. And it was apparent when I was watching it the other day, the level of competition seems to have gotten better. I think there's a handful of players over there that could potentially play in the big leagues here, but that's yet to be seen. I was super sad. Off topic, I was super sad to see Park Byung-ho go back to South Korea. I thought that he would have been outstanding here if he would have just been a little bit more confident. The mentality over there is a lot different than it is here, obviously, which I think is why you see more foreigners succeed in South Korea, where you see more South Koreans and Japanese players come to the United States and fail.
Yeah, and you talk about, obviously a lot of that has to do with the players coming to the U.S. and having that culture shock a little bit. How about for you, the opposite direction, going over there and you're eating Korean food all the time, and what's that situation like?
It's delicious. If you guys ever have a chance to eat Korean food, there's a spot in Dinkytown right across from TCF called Korea Restaurant. It's like walking into a time machine. No joke. It's every bit as good and every bit as authentic as it is in South Korea. But it was different. There was a little bit of culture shock going on. The stardom that we had almost immediately overnight. I remember overnight when I signed my contract with the LG Twins and I was flying back from winter ball I was flying back from Venezuela. Catherine, my wife, sent me a text. She's like, dude, your Twitter account went from like 100 followers to like 12,000. And I had tweeted something, hey, I'm excited to, just sign a contract with the LG Twins, excited to get at it. And it blew up overnight. So as soon as we got there, I'm 6'5". We stick out like sore thumbs in a country like that. So it was almost immediately when we got there, we recognized that, okay, we're not in Kansas anymore. It's a level of, you have to carry yourself with a certain professionalism at that level, because it's really, really difficult. You don't want to get caught doing something that you're not supposed to be doing at that level, because it just gets blown way out of proportion to a certain extent or whatever it might be. But it was really a lot of fun for us. We did a lot of shopping. We got to visit a lot of different areas in South Korea, especially in Seoul, where we lived. The culture over there is awesome. The food over there is incredible. I would really recommend anybody go over to South Korea at one point in their life just for a vacation even. So
Ben, you're a former Duluth Denfeld hunter. Sorry, I cut off Dave. I'll let him go after this. But Denfeld obviously broke a huge state tournament drought last season. Now, just like everybody else, their season, they were robbed of it. They also had the czar of Northland baseball, Joe Wickland, coming over to coach them. What do you say to kids that didn't get a chance this year? I know nothing really takes the blow away, but how have you felt about it, and what would you tell somebody?
Yeah, it's tough because I've got an 8-year-old his summer baseball has really kind of been taken away from him, and a lot of their activities have kind of been taken away from him. Part of me wants to say, suck it up. There's other opportunities around the corner. The other part of me, it is really tough. You think about, I remember being a senior and playing my last baseball game really before any of this happened with me playing professional baseball. That was still a pipe dream at that point. I had no college aspirations at that point, really to go play D1 baseball. And so it was really difficult for me to think about the possibility that might be the last time I ever played baseball at a competitive level like that. You think about all the friends that you make in high school and the people that you play with. So my heart goes out to him. It's tough, but this is kind of an unprecedented situation too. So, I think that, at a college level, I'm really hoping that the NCAA will allow those seniors to come back and play one more season. I think they should. It's obviously a lot more difficult at a high school level. Once you graduate from high school, you're done. You move on to college. So, my heart goes out to him for sure. There's not a lot. I'm not an expert on it, but it does seem like they did get robbed a little bit. And I wish that there was something that they could do, but it just kind of is what it is.
So Ben, I want to take you back to winter ball. I guess I didn't realize you played in Venezuela. You hear all kinds of stories about playing winter ball in Venezuela. What do you remember? We got a story or two for us.
I got a story for you. Where's I wonder if my wife can hear this story. So we've talked about this quite a bit. I remember, so I played in the Dominican Republic first, and then the year following that, I played in Venezuela. And I had just played against the best team in Venezuela, and I think I gave up one hit through 7 innings or 6 innings or something like that. And that was one of 2 starts that I made, I think, in Venezuela before I signed my contract with the LG Twins. And I remember I was in my hotel room and I got a call at like 3:30 in the morning from some girl that I had never met who seemed to know exactly what my hotel room number was and my name and where I was from, saying that she had some rum and wanted to party. And I was like, I have no idea who you are. You are not coming near my room. My deadbolt just went on.
But I would have said leave the rum at the door, right?
Yeah, leave the rum at the door and see yourself out. But it was pretty entertaining. There's a lot of really fun stuff. Venezuela baseball. It was really the other thing that I experienced when I was in Venezuela is we had armed guards to and from the stadium, and we were not allowed to leave the hotel except to go into the adjoining mall that was next to us. We weren't allowed to leave. We weren't allowed to go out for a run. Everything we had to do in the weight room there, just because of the they were so worried about foreign players getting kidnapped and ransomed for money, and it's Americans in general or foreign people in general, which I will say most of the ransoms are like $50 and they get paid off and everyone's happy at the end of the day. But that's not a scenario that I want to find myself in either. So it was fairly entertaining when I was there.
Ben, one of the more interesting things that you've said about your pitches and what got you where, you started with your curveball. So many pitchers today, it's don't throw the break and stuff. It's tough on the elbow. Don't do it too young. What would you tell young pitchers who want to be the next you or beyond that?
Here's kind of my 2 cents on it. Once my kid is able to grip a baseball and he wants to start throwing a baseball, I know that there's science behind it that would say wait. And there is some truth to that. I think the age is like 14 where they don't want them throwing curveballs until 14. I think a lot of it is genetics, to be perfectly honest with you. And here's the deal. You can wait until you're 14 years old and then blow your elbow out on a fastball that you're throwing in college. It's kind of the luck of the draw. It really is. I will sit here and I will tell you that 95% of being able to get to that level is just your God-given ability to throw a baseball. And beyond that, it's kind of like destiny. If you believe something like that, or fate, or however you want to look at it, it's going to happen the way it's supposed to happen regardless. I tell my kids all the time with this coronavirus pandemic and everything going on and being laid off, my 8-year-old is going, Dad, you shouldn't go back to work. You should go play baseball again. And I have to tell him over and over, it doesn't work like that. I'm 37 years old.
But he's committed. He's going to get up at 4 a.m. to watch you. Just go back there at home.
Then he can be better than me. I will be more than happy to watch my son do anything and everything that I have ever done except better. But to that end, when he's old enough and he wants to start learning how to throw a curveball, I'll show him how to throw it. But, throwing a curveball and having it break at a big league level is different than throwing a curveball and it just kind of being a loop-de-loop curveball. It's a little bit different. But at the end of the day, if he wants to learn how to throw a curveball, I'll teach him how to throw a curveball. I don't really look at the age limit. I would put more emphasis on the pitch count that they have in little leagues than when we should start telling them when and when not to throw curveballs. That's my opinion. I think pitch count's way bigger.
So speaking of not going back, despite your son, maybe begging for it a little bit, when did you know it was time to be done?
I was in South Korea, and statistically, I was having one of the worst seasons of my career. We had just bought a house. My wife was back in the U.S. here, and I remember having a conversation with her in the hotel room that I was thinking about maybe retiring. I was just getting worn out. I was tired of the travel. And I'll tell you what I tell everybody is that once you start having that conversation with yourself, it's over. You don't have the same mindset anymore. You're not as sharp on the mound. Your work ethic suffers. I came back that off season with the intentions of continuing to play baseball but except back in the U.S. I had twin scouts looking at me, potentially to go back to AA. And, I was skipping my workouts. I was working out at Crown College out in Waconia. And I remember just skipping my workouts. And I was just, one day I looked in the mirror and I said, if I'm not going to take this seriously, I'm not going to put myself through this because I'm not going to go to spring training and make myself look like an idiot. And that was really it for me at that point, is when I knew that it was time to be done.
Your last response, you mentioned pitch count. A lot of people our age complain about it. The get off my lawn, back in my day, people could log more innings. You think pitch count is key, at least at the little league, at the young level. What do you think of it now when a pro starter, it's, he threw 100 pitches, all of a sudden he's going to evaporate into thin air, even if it's the 5th or the 8th? What's your take on that?
I think it's more difficult I think the pitch count is more prevalent at the big league level than it is at like a high school level. Okay. But I also think pitch count is important on young athletes at a little league level. On the simple fact that, I look at the way that I was kind of treated when I was in college, and I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I didn't love it. I loved going out and competing, and I would probably do it again. But there were situations where I was used to start the first game of a doubleheader, and then I had to go close the second game of the doubleheader that same day. And it really does take a toll on you, even as young as you are. And I remember being that young and had a rubber arm, and I could throw for hours and hours and hours, and I could throw 100 pitches and go out the next day and throw 100 more. But the wear and tear that it takes on your arm, you only have so many bullets. I would caution anybody at a young age to really consider, if you're going to go out and throw 50 or 60 pitches, give yourself a couple of days to recover. Don't just sit there and wear yourself out. It's tough because you're a kid, you don't know any better. And at the college level, you're bred to compete at that point, trying to get to a big league level. You've got something to prove. And so it's a little bit different, and it's really difficult as an athlete to be able to shut yourself down. Most of us won't do it, which I think it falls more on a coaching staff at that point, and being able to, rein it in on the athlete to make sure that they're being taken care of.
I think that Brian and I have done a couple of games at Division III, and we'll see a pitcher out there at 100 pitches, and it'll be like, oh, they're going to come and get him pretty soon. And then by the end of the inning, after he's given up 5 hits and 3 runs, and he's still out there at 125. And Brian, you remember we did one tournament game where the kid pitched 150 pitches, and we were both like, he's a senior in college.
Right.
He's not even going to be able to lift groceries.
And he came back out of the bullpen the next day. Of course, that was a tournament championship, and you throw all the proverbial cliches out the window, but it does happen. Dave and Topher, I know you got one each left.
Well, I was going to ask about spring training. Training, the opening of the season, Ben. Give us a story from spring training.
I don't really have a story from spring training. It's difficult to do something like that because, when you're in spring training, you really got to mind your P's and Q's because everybody in the organization is there. The who's of the bigwigs. It's really difficult for me to put my finger on one thing that I noticed in the big leagues. I do remember facing what was his name? Beltre. He was with
Just don't touch his head.
God, I can't remember who he was with. I can't remember who he was with at that point, but he hit a ball off me that went like 500 feet. Straight over the center field wall. I'd never seen a ball hit that hard in my entire life. And then I kind of got an idea that, that's what it's like to face a big league hitter at that point. But it's funny because they're super, super. If like, a lot of times they'll think too much at the plate, and it's super easy to I shouldn't say super easy because if it was easy, I'd still be playing, but they get into patterns just like pitchers do. And if you throw 2 fastballs on the outside corner of the plate, they're looking away, and it's really easy to come back inside and jam them to a certain extent, as long as you're not facing like a dead pull hitter. So there's a lot of intricacies that go into that I'm not going to get into. But I don't really have a lot from spring training, unfortunately. I wish I did. But with everybody that's there, the from the general manager all the way down to every single coach that's coaching the minor league teams there, it's really difficult. You really got to kind of pay attention to what you're doing.
Sure.
Yeah, and Ben, you kind of started alluding to it a little bit, talking about Beltre, but I was just going to ask, who's like the toughest hitter that you faced at some point in your career? Maybe it was some guy at AA or AAA that maybe didn't do much, but for some reason gave you fits.
Oh, okay.
Uh-oh.
The beauty of live video /
Did we lose
radio.
him right there?
We may have lost him. It's
no.
a great frozen image of Ben Jukich, but I think we may have lost him. But that was one of the questions that I had too. Dave, to put it in maybe Twins lore, who's Ben Jukich's Craig Monroe or Jim Eisenreich? who gives him fits
Yeah.
that maybe didn't do anything else.
I probably should have coined my question better, because that's kind of what I was looking for. When you were in spring training, is there a story about a guy you faced? We should have asked him about Denfeld, just his experiences out west. And
Right.
see
Right.
what
Well, and
see how Brian
Topher
would have
alluded.
said.
Well, I wouldn't have said anything overly positive or overly negative. I did give him a Denfeld question, but Topher, you kind of hit on it before we had him join us. How unheralded he was. It was Denfeld baseball wasn't a big thing then, but he was.
Right, exactly. And I think that's what the cool part of Ben Jukich's story, I think, is just the never giving up, because he went through high school, but he mentioned he had no scouts all over him in high school, his senior year of high school. He thought his baseball career was over. And then he ended up playing summer ball with the guy who knows a guy and gets a shot at a community college in Nebraska. And then, a few steps down the road, he's pitching in AAA and, facing Adrian Beltre. Aroldis Chapman's coming into the same locker room as him. It's a total story of you never know when the next opportunity is going to be there, really, for anything in life. It's a cool story.
Well, one of the things that we like to do is sometimes pose our fun topics to our guests. I wanted to ask him what team he'd want to be quarantined with, because he does know these guys. He might give us a party-oriented answer, but he does know.
Yeah, that would have been a great question, Brian. That's true.
What if he tells me he wants to be quarantined? Right. What if he tells me he wants to be quarantined with the 09 LG Twins because he knows those guys? It's a perspective we wouldn't give.
Yeah, we wouldn't have any access to. It would be fun to hear some of those stories about the guys. Maybe your experiences with the Dukes and some of those guys that are 35 and trying to make their way back. I'm sure he saw those guys when he was pitching in AAA as well.
Right, and I know, Topher, you've been around the Huskies, the Dukes, just like I have, and it's amazing. When I first got my job with the Dukes, one of my colleagues at a TV station in Duluth said, write a book, and I went, okay, sure. And then I lived that season and seasons that followed, and I went, you know what, I should have. It's just a different life.
No, you're absolutely right, and especially thinking, I started working as a bat boy at 9 years old in the locker rooms with these guys, and just the characters that came through there, and not even just the names, but just seeing some of these guys and what they would do and the things and stories that you would hear. I wouldn't change it for the world. I don't know if my mom would be pumped if she knew everything I learned about life.
My thoughts exactly. Yes, what I knew and how I learned. Yes.
Exactly. But you know what? Honestly, I learned a lot of they're funny stories, but I also learned, I'm not going to go do that myself because I saw that idiot go do it, and it didn't turn out too well for him. So I do wish I could, writing a book and had a more vivid memory of every single one of those days, because there were some wild characters in independent ball in the mid-90s.
Absolutely. Thinking COVID time, I've got nothing but time. Maybe I should do that. Speaking of wild characters, Dave Hoops from Hoops Brewing is next. That'll do it for hour number 1. Thank you to Ben Jukich, wherever you ended up in Cyberland. I hope we can thank you properly. Like and subscribe. This is hour 1. Hour number 2 is next. Northland Sports Page. We'll be right back.